西点军校21岁的华裔学生 Peter 朱在2月滑雪时受重伤致脑死亡。他的父母要求在捐献其器官的同时保留唯一的儿子的精子。位于纽约威彻斯特的纽约州高院判决同意了 Peter 朱家人的要求，但表示将在3月21日举行听证，决定其精子的最终使用权。该案件引发议论，在逝者没有书面要求的情况下，父母是否有权申请保留孩子的精子或卵子，以便将来孕育孙儿？美国中文网记者叶文多采访到了斯坦福大学法学院法律及生物科学中心主任 Henry Greely 教授。
Well, my first reaction to this case was terrible sadness. It's a great tragedy for any young person, and particularly such a promising young person trying to help his country. To be cut down in an accident like that is a terrible thing, and I feel very deeply for his friends and family, and particularly for his parents. In most places, in most of these cases, a judge isn't necessarily going to get involved. If the spouse, or in some cases the parent with a letter from the son, the child saying this is what I want, took that to the hospital or took that to the clinic, oftentimes that would be enough without needing to go to a judge. This is a judge in New York. New York's laws are going to be different from California's laws. Almost everyone would have allowed it if the dead man had, in writing in advance, said, should I die in an accident, I would like my sperm to be preserved and given to my parents for possible use. If he had said that in writing, I think everyone would have agreed with it. If he had been married or had had a partner, and the partner said, I would like to use this, I want this so the two of us can have a baby together, I think almost everybody would have approved of it. It gets trickier when there's no partner, when you don't have his wishes directly and you only have his parents' wishes, because the grandparents, as much as they'll love their grandchildren, they're grandparents. The child won't really have a father and may not, and it's hard to know what kind of parental situation he will have. I have heard of cases where young men's parents have had sperm retrieved afterwards and ultimately used it to produce a grandchild. The cases I know about are in Israel. Israel has the strongest policy favoring parenthood. On the other hand, a number of European countries have laws against it. In the United States, there's really no clear law one way or the other. I understand that the Stanford Medical Center and its in vitro fertilization clinic would only use sperm from a deceased person if either there was a written statement from the dead man or he had a living partner or spouse who said, yes, this is what he wanted and what I want. But they will not accept it based on the parents' desires. And one important thing is each hospital or center really needs to think about what its policy will be. There are other centers that would do it. There are reasonable arguments both ways. It's really good if you're an IVF center. It's really good if you're a fertility center to think about this in advance and have a policy. This is not going to be a question of federal law across the whole country. This will be a question of each state. But as far as I'm aware, no state has a clear law about this. As a result, it'll be up to each individual center to decide what it wants to do and what it doesn't. The centers do have an organization to represent the interests of all of the assisted reproduction centers, and they have some policy advice for centers. Ultimately, unless states pass statutes on it, it's going to be a decision by the center based on how it weighs the various advantages and disadvantages, the various benefits and risks to the children, the wishes of the dead man, the wishes of any partner, and the wishes of the parents. I think those are likely to differ from place to place. But I think this is a good lesson about the importance of being prepared. I don't certainly blame the dead man for not being prepared. If you're a 20-year-old, you're not thinking about death. If you're a 20-year-old who's about to be sent into combat, maybe you should think about death and what you would do and what you would want done. But no one expects to die in a skiing accident. But I think the centers, and particularly the New York center involved, the New York hospital involved, really needed to have a policy about this, needed to have thought things through and come to a conclusion about what they would do. That doesn't necessarily mean that that would force the parents to accept their policy. The parents might then try a different hospital. But these are hard questions. Reasonable people can come to different conclusions. One of the other interesting aspects of this is that the dead man chose to be an organ donor. And so some good will come from this tragic death for the patients whose lives will be saved or helped by his organs. It's hard to know how to figure that into this case, though. On the one hand, it says he wanted good things to happen from his body if he died, and babies might be a good thing. On the other hand, if he thought about and listed these organs and thought about donating those organs, you might say, well, maybe that means he thought about donating sperm or having his sperm preserved but decided not to. So it's hard to know which way that cuts in terms of what was in his mind at the time. So I think if this court says yes, that's probably the end of it, and the parents will have custody of the frozen sperm, and at some point we'll have to decide what, if anything, to do with it. You know, they'll need to decide, are we going to find a woman who will be the mother of our grandson or granddaughter? If the judge says no, it shouldn't be allowed, I would expect the parents to appeal, and then we would get possibly a more important appellate court decision on this question. Important, at least in New York. It would be some help to courts in other states. I expect that there will be discussion of what would be best for the child. That gets a little tricky, because if they rule against the parents, there will never be a child. Is it in the best interest of this child to never be born, or to be born sometime in the future using a dead man's sperm with an egg from a woman that we don't know of? We don't know anything about who the mother might end up being. So I think probably there would be discussion of the best interest of the child, if there is a child, and the desires and the confidence with which you could predict what the dead man would have wanted. I think if I had been the judge involved, I probably would have done what he did. But this is a really close question where lots of different people have reasonable views that are different from each other, and different countries have different positions. One of the reasons I would have allowed this is that the parents were so firm in their discussion of how this is what he wanted. And to some extent, I wouldn't put great weight on the cultural background, but I would put some weight on the cultural background. I think the cultural background here made it more understandable. And his own family background, where he was the only boy among a set of cousins, that gives me more confidence that this is what he would have wanted. So from my perspective, you should do what the dead man wanted. It's a lot easier if the dead man had written it down or said it to lots of different people. But I think the fact that the parents say that that's what he wanted, and that that's consistent with what's likely to be a strong cultural urge in this family, gives me confidence that this is probably what he would have wanted. Decisions made by the trial court, the lowest court, usually aren't as important as decisions made by appellate courts, and certainly not decisions made by the U.S. Supreme Court. This case is before a lower court judge in New York. It could lead to a precedent that will have some force, but I don't think it would be necessarily followed by other judges unless it was affirmed by appellate courts, higher courts, and so on. This didn't catch the policy world or the academic world completely by surprise, but I think it does catch most people by surprise, because most people don't think about this. They don't know it's a possibility. So one good thing, and one thing that news programs can do, is help inform and educate people that this is a possibility and something that they should think about. Now again, no one expects a 20-year-old to die in a skiing accident. But there are people, say people going into combat, or people with very dangerous jobs, or people who have a bad illness. So someone who has, a young person who has cancer might want to think in advance about, do I want to have my sperm or my eggs frozen while I'm still alive? Would I like them to be retrieved and frozen after I'm dead? The more people know that this is a possibility, the more likely we are to have people make plans in advance. Planning in advance doesn't always work, but it helps more often than it hurts.